In our previous video, we touched on the importance of mathematical techniques in order to find gold. Can you expand on that a little bit further?
You need two things. The first thing you need is access to a set of audiences that represent as much of your population as possible, preferably with as much breadth and depth of interest as possible. And the second thing you need is access to an audience that represents what it is you want to achieve. And the best example of this is the group of people that reach the end of your booking process, because they're your customers. That's the best signal, your converters. But increasingly today, brands could also use things like their offline purchase records or their offline CRM records and bring those online for the same purpose.
So once we've done all that, we've got our audiences sitting in our data management platform, which is great. But how does the evaluation process actually work?
Well, what you're looking for is a statistical measure of the relative overlap between what it is you want to evaluate and the audience that represents what it is you want to achieve. So if we use an airline as an example, they might have tens of thousands of converters in a given week or a given month. And we can compare those converters to a much larger audience, let's say an audience representing people with a general interest in travel. And we can look at the relative overlap. And what we'll see that makes sense is that if you're going to book an airline or book a flight, then you're more than likely to research travel, and therefore your travel audience is more likely to become a customer. And it's the extent of that relative overlap that's going to give you an actionable and an objective number. But we can also compare our converters to a much smaller but potentially far more relevant audience. So let's imagine the audience representing people researching a specific city. And it turns out that that city is a major destination for the airline. When we evaluate the relative overlap, it's no surprise that we're going to find that's far higher. So the key here is that we can give each and every audience a statistical score, whether we can actually go on to explain that score with marketing intuition or not.
Looking at our own online behaviour, we know that we're interested in more than one thing at any moment in time. Can the framework that you've described cope with the complexity of combinations?
You're absolutely right, because in people's real lives, they might have multiple things going on. So on the one hand, there might be a set of purchases that they're considering. And then the other hand, there'll be a set of media consumption behaviours that represent their real interests and passions. And what this framework can do is look at the power of the combinations of those interests. So what we could do with our airline example is take our large pool of travel interest users, and we could combine that with smaller and even seemingly random audiences, such as people with an interest in a specific car model or people with an interest in a specific celebrity. But now that we're using machine, we can actually query many more of those possible options, if not all of those options. And then we can look at the combination and evaluate that against the converters. So in some cases, the relative overlap between these combined audiences can be extremely high, but you have to query many of these combinations to find that. And these combinations can be very powerful from an insights point of view, what they tell you about your brand. They can be very powerful from an optimization point of view. But because they're combinations, they also tend to be quite small, and therefore they tend to be less useful for targeting strategies.